Welcome to Magic Academy podcast. Today's guest is Josh Cavalier, the founder of joshcavalier.ai. And do you mind to give us a brief introduction of who you are, what you are being focusing on, and what has been your professional journey so far?
Sure, Johnny. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm so glad to be here. Just a little bit of background on myself. This is actually my 30th year in learning and development. I got started way back in 19 as an art director for an e-learning firm based here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And that was an amazing experience. That was back in the CD-ROM days. Actually, a little secret. I got started like my first e-learning project wasn't even like with a computer, it was with a mainframe. So I was actually doing mainframe screens for training purposes. It wasn't that exciting. I mean, they really didn't even need an art director for that. It was just all green screen stuff, so it was really kind of boring. So
Mhm.
I was all caught up in large projects involving CD-ROMs, and the budgets were huge. So we were doing all kinds of massive filming with actors and stages, and it was crazy. So
That
I
sounds
did that
fun.
for about oh, it was great. I did that for about 4 or 5 years, and then I started a training firm called Lodestone, and we were one of the Adobe's top training providers in the United States, and I did that for just over 20 years. So I had offices in New York, Cleveland, Houston, Boston, Charlotte, and we were extremely busy. Now, in that capacity, I personally would go into organizations, L&D groups, and spin up education technology. So I did tons of Storyline and Captivate training, Adobe tools to help with media production, and I did that for many years. Then decided to go ahead and put a pause on that, jump back into corporate. So during the COVID years, I was a learning architect for a supply chain company here in the States that focused mostly on tires. And that was an amazing experience because I got to work on extremely large projects that were high impact in the organization and got to see the dynamic of what it was like to work for a $5 billion supply chain company. And then guess what? AI showed up.
Mm.
And I took a keen interest in it because I knew it was an inflection point. It was just like having the experience of the computer, or actually the experience of seeing a video game on the screen the very first time and being able to control the screen, or working with a mobile phone. Like, you have these moments you're like, oh, this is different. This is going to be different. And I felt that with AI. So I jumped in, and by March of 2023 decided to get back as an entrepreneur full time. And the way that shows up is joshcavalier.ai. So I do online courses, workshops, webinars. I do a lot of public speaking. So if you head to a learning and development conference sometime in 2024, you're going to see me doing a few keynotes this year. So a lot going on in 2024. But try to keep it short. But that's pretty much everything as far as my career.
I feel very lucky to catch you up with this conversation before you give those keynote speech.
Right, exactly.
Excellent. So yeah, that makes me very curious. So you've been kind of consulting and helping organizations and especially their learning development department to kind of up their games, facing the challenges and opportunities with AI. Um, can you give us kind of a big picture overview of what has been going on, what are yet to come, what are some potential challenges? Maybe if you have some stories, that would be
Sure.
great. Maybe some basic terminology explanation, that will also be
Sure.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, if we take a look at the activity that's happening out there in regards to learning and development departments in the adoption of artificial intelligence, it is across the spectrum. And so when I first got into consulting or working with customers in artificial intelligence, those are pretty much organizations that knew they had to put their foot on the gas pedal because it was going to be a high impact, or potential that competitors could beat them at the punch with their product. And so the first people I engaged with were companies that were very much into certifications or doing knowledge-based products. And so that was kind of fascinating to see those types of companies that really wanted to figure this out immediately. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I have companies that don't even have an AI policy. And so before I even speak to the L&D department, or I've spoken to whole companies before, I have made sure that there is some type of AI policy in place, because that lays the foundation. That really gives the marching orders in regards to how AI is used. And so, in this, in March it'll be a year I've been doing the consulting around generative AI with L&D departments. I've seen a spectrum. I've seen companies that just implement an AI policy, but you can use any AI tool that you want with, it's kind of loose as far as IP and what should be, used or not used. And then I have some companies to where they have been very thoughtful as far as how generative AI shows up, and they allow their associates to use AI, but in a very regulated way through a portal, so all their activity can be tracked, their prompts, their returns. And I've seen that show up a couple different ways. I've seen some pretty neat implementations that were actually through Microsoft Teams, to where you could use AI by clicking on an app in Teams. I've also seen it through a portal where you can pick your model, and it could be GPT-4, 3.5, Dolly, whatever the case may be. So you pick your model, you prompt, but then everything is tracked through APIs. So kind of interesting to see the dynamic that's happening out there, again, depending upon the culture and the protections around intellectual property, and then also access to AI by associates. Again, it's showing up very differently across that spectrum.
Mm, mm. That's great. I think also in one of our kind of previous conversation, you talk about the quality of data, how the data needs to be very structured in order to use or leverage AI effectively. Is this still the case with the current development, the new model coming up? What's your take on that? How matter is data?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's huge.
IP data or
When I
IP
look
free
at
data.
generative AI, there's two key pieces to that. One is data, which I'll get to in a second. The other is compute power, and you have to have both. You have to have good quality, clean data, and you have to have compute power to actually go ahead and drive the model to give responses back in a proper period of time, right?
Mm,
And that's
mm,
what we're facing right now. Even when you are using a large model like GPT, the reason why it's so effective is because of the trillions, potentially trillions, of data points that are in that model, thus giving it its quality. When I give when I'm giving a class, I was teaching a class last week, we'll compare the 3.5 model versus 4. And the 3.5 model, it's just okay, but it's really fast, right? It's quick. And the 4 model gives you really great results, but it's slow. So there's a trade-off going there.
mm,
And I see that even when companies are attempting to refine the responses with ChatGPT or GPT with additional knowledge bases or documents, or retrieval augmented generation, which is called RAG. That's where you can take documents and supplement the returns that are coming back from the query or your message to ChatGPT with the information in those documents. So again, it's very focused data there that's helping give you really good results coming back. It's not perfect. It's far from perfect, but it's better. It's better. And so I think there's this maturation process, data, and you're going to see organizations maybe take a step back and look at their whole entire ecosystem in regards to like their knowledge repositories. Do we have
mm,
SharePoint? Are we on Google? Where is all of our documents stored? How is it architected? Because eventually, L&D is going to come into play to where they're going to have to reference those documents for some type of performance support system that is AI enhanced. And so we're going to see the companies that already had their act together in regards to data accelerate really fast, and or pick models that use great data so that they can be productive within the current constraints of the whole entire environment. Let me give you an example. So let's say that I need to go ahead and create an image, an AI image for something commercial, for commercial purposes. Well, if I use Midjourney, first I can't copyright the image, but it's quite possible that Midjourney was trained on copyrighted images, and it still has not been worked out in the courts. But if I go and I use Adobe Firefly, the data that they used to train the image generation model is all copyright approved. So all of their, all their stock photography and the relationships that they have with the individuals that have provided that information allows an individual to create an image in Firefly and then use it for commercial purposes, in so much that Adobe has set in protections saying we'll cover your legal bills. So if you get sued with an AI generated image, Adobe will come in and help out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Impressive. So
So
they
yeah,
must be very confident in their product.
I would say so. Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, data is critical, and you're going to see that play out as the technology continues to mature.
And you talk about the IP, and there's a lot of like unresolved issues. So coming from the big picture perspective, there could be like data privacy, IP, the governance, the policies, and the social equity. And what's your general kind of guidance, or maybe a simple strategy for people to think to get started or lay the foundation when
Yeah,
they're
first don't
dealing with
upload your corporate IP. That'd be the first thing to do, is not do that, and understand that these models, and depending upon if it's a closed model, which Chat GPT and Bard and Claude, those are all closed models, they're not open source models. Odds are they're training the model on the prompts and any files that you upload to get a response. Now, there are protections in place. For instance, if you get a OpenAI Teams or Enterprise account, they said they will not train the model on any documents that you upload to get a result, or to come back from ChatGPT. So be careful. There's so many different ways that you can hurt your company or yourself personally if you upload your own personal information. So, like, to start with a project, how does that show up? If I'm concerned about my personal or even a corporate Chat GPT account, it's not a team account, it's not enterprise, and I'm not allowed to upload IP, well, how do I get started? What can I do? I mean, you can use Chat GPT or a large language model as a companion, or as someone who can help you solve a problem or give you ideas, right? Or maybe help you write or create without uploading or giving away any kind of corporate IP. Or maybe it's a topic that is just a public topic. I know that there's one topic that I worked on, ESG, so it's environment, social governance, which is it's a huge area within public corporations or larger corporations. And because of all the information that I work with was public knowledge, it was amazing working with ChatGPT to get multiple choice questions for a question bank and have it create all the distractors. If you've ever written multiple choice questions, making really good distractors is difficult. But when you're working in tandem with AI, it was a breeze. It was actually it created some incredibly good multiple choice question distractors, but with that public information. So from an IP standpoint, again, make sure you understand your relationship with that IP and the AI, and whether or not you should upload it or not, again, based upon the protections you have in place with the account type that you have.
And in terms of like the governance model, what would be a good way of governance that helps protect the IP, but also enhance the creativity, like generate new ideas, and that
Mhm.
could potentially enhance their existing IP? Does governance play a role? If so, how does that play out?
Yeah, I touched upon it already, and it's really having the AI policy, the corporate or organizational AI policy in place, because that's going to go ahead and dictate how it shows up, right?
Mm.
And then, okay, so if you are allowed to go ahead and use AI, what tools have been vetted by cybersecurity or the IT department that are clean and will not have any kind of impact from an IP standpoint, right? You have to make sure that you have those foundational elements in regards to governance in place, or you're not building a solid foundation within your organization. You can go ahead and let your associates start using AI immediately, but if you don't have any kind of governance in place there, you're going to run into some issues. And we just talked about uploading IP or inadvertent uploads of IP. I know for a fact that even when, again, it depends upon the situation, where some companies have said, no, you cannot use ChatGPT or any AI, individuals will use their phone and they will go ahead and use ChatGPT on their phone, on their personal phone, do some work, and then email it to themselves. So, like, this kind of activity is happening even when things are shut down. So, you can only imagine what could be going on if you have no policy in place. Because those are organizations that actually have a policy in place. So, yeah, that governance issue is paramount. I mean, it's one of those foundational items that need to be there.
Is there exemplary kind of policies in place? Is there any organizations that's doing great in terms of coming out with their policies, or is there any government agencies that's helping organizations to come up with solid policies, or it's custom made? You have to talk within your own team to
Yeah, it's
figure out.
interesting. So, you see um, legal departments within organizations really get after it and see what's out there, see what other companies have created. I believe that there are really good examples in the federal government or even state government. You start to see, like the state of New York or even federal agencies begin to immediately implement AI policies. And you talk about ultimate protections. I mean, when it comes to national security or any other kind of like state type security issues, they have to have these policies in place,
Mm.
right? So if you have no clue as to how you even get started, you may want to go ahead and take a look at these policies, which are fully available online, to get an
Mm.
idea of the protections that these organizations have. There are plenty of example AI policies now floating around because so many companies have implemented at this point. But again, it all begins with legal, working in tandem with the HR team and cybersecurity or IT to make sure that there is a policy that's in place that if that policy is broken, HR knows how to handle that individual associate.
So I feel like for organizations just getting into the AI space, if they don't know anything, the first thing they need to do is just develop that policy.
Yes.
So
Yeah, exactly. Even, well, there is one other aspect to that, and it's the leadership of the company understanding the way that the business is going to use AI, because that also drives the policy, right? So, like for instance, if it's a type of company where, oh my gosh, we must have our associates use AI in production or whatever they're doing, that's going to drive AI policy. Or if I'm a bank or an insurance company, we can't have associates use AI. There's too many risks involved. We can get sued. We're going to lock things down, right? So it's really the business's relationship to AI that drives the policy, not the other way around. Like, you shouldn't have the policy in place, and then that's going to go ahead and hinder or um, prohibit your associates from working with AI the way they should to accelerate your business.
yeah, because it's the classic balance between like regulation and innovation and how.
Right.
The policy is designed pro innovation while protecting things that needs to be protected.
Yes,
Feels like takes a lot of
exactly.
thinking. Yeah. Great. People have been building like bots, like AI. They're using AI to build all sorts of like customer support bots,
Right.
uh, teachers bots, TAs bots, conversation bots, all kinds of bots. And I know you have built a bot that helps you to generate multiple choices based on different topics.
Right.
And I've used that. It's super cool. And is this trend is gonna continue? You're gonna see more people building bots, or are there any things that we need to take into considerations as the technology continuously to evolve?
To answer your question, yes. Like there will be more bots that are out there. There are other like names for them, like autonomous agents. And so, when we're thinking about the interactions between human and computer when it comes to transferring knowledge, performance support, or assigning tasks, there's various ways that it shows up. Like, so if we were to like take a look at a spectrum of what would be like the lowest hanging fruit
Mm,
of an effective bot, it's not leveraging GPT-4 and creating some kind of crazy prompt to get information back from a performance support standpoint, or even doing retrieval augmented generation or RAG to get exclusive knowledge.
mm,
I don't think that's it at all. I mean, because we're still seeing examples of chatbots being jailbroke, right? So people are actually figuring out ways to hack these bots through prompt engineering techniques to give it answers that really shouldn't be given, right? So going back to like that low hanging fruit, it's really the old fashioned chatbot that is built on top of a knowledge management system, not necessarily AI. In other words, like you're doing some manual uploading of documents or referencing of documents or manual responses of the chatbot to very specific questions. And we've all been on websites to where you're going back and forth with the chatbot and it's giving you information. It's all pre-programmed, right?
mm, mm. They have a list
So,
of QAs. If they
oh
ask
yeah,
this
right.
question, this is your answer.
And
Yep.
so from there, then you start to eventually weave into it AI based interactions that are going to go ahead and expand what's possible in regards to, again, performance support or just answering a question or whatever the case may be. So that's the start. But then
Mm,
you start moving up the chain, and next would be an AI bot that is based on a large language model or a custom trained model with tons of guardrails in place. And I
mm,
think that's the important part is like the custom training and making sure that it's effective to not allow a jailbreak type situation that could be horrible, but also to train it to know when to have human intervention. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest of AI technology is when we have a chatbot or when we have an autonomous agent that's doing tasks for us, that agent or that chatbot knows when to pause and to have a
mm.
human interact or to get a human involved to make a decision before it continues. That I think is going to be the critical part of all of this, as opposed to just having AI just go full steam ahead, even if error rates are low. To have that human intervention at critical junctures, whether it be a conversation or autonomous agent doing some type of work, that's going to play a huge part.
This is so interesting. It's almost it's developing a metacognitive thinking ability to self-assess what they need in order to better answer a particular question or better produce a particular outcome.
It's
Mm.
funny. A lot of the conversations around AI are where we have artificial general intelligence, AGI, to where it is like can think on itself or by itself. And I don't believe it's going to get to that point like anytime soon. I think it's always going to be this flow of human, AI, human, not just human and then AI, to where I'm going to go ahead and have an autonomous agent spin up all kinds of different co-workers, and these agents are doing all kinds of work and they destroy themselves, and the work is done and then the work gets analyzed and it's just fully automated. It's really tough for me to see that happening without some type of human intervention, some type of human review or to happen. Now, I could be off. I could be completely wrong about this, but I think the compute power to do that is through the roof. And I just don't believe that there's enough compute power out there to handle that at this point. At least
Mm.
that's publicly available. Again,
Yeah.
privately, different story, but publicly, I don't think it's there.
Yeah, and again, we technology always has the ability to surprise us. So
Right.
we never know what's going to happen. Just
Nope.
the least we can do is just stay open and stay speculative
That's right.
as best
Exactly.
as we can.
Yeah, you just don't know
Um,
what's going to come out at all.
yeah,
I think that's one of the things I love about this period in time is, well, it's like the name of the show. There's moments of magic that are happening where you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this is doing this type of work. And I've experienced that so many times over the past year, to where I look at it and I go, I can't believe that it created that storyboard, or was able to go ahead and generate that voice that sounds just like mine, or create a video that looks like me. It's fascinating.
it's
It seems like every week I do have those moments still where I'm just like, it takes my breath away.
and deep appreciation for those folks who's working tirelessly behind the scene to make technology advancing and available for us.
Right.
Great. And as we were talking about building a bot,
Hmm.
prompt engineering is kind of what's being talked about. Like in order to build a
Right.
bot, you have to like tell them exactly what to do, what not to do. And you also talk about building a prompt to prevent being hacked.
Right.
So there's a lot of like nuanced engineering in there. And on the other side, people think prompt engineering is just like temporary. We just need to wait it out. Later on, it's gonna be just like human communicating with human, even though they're not human. So we don't need to learn prompt engineering. Just wait it out. So what's your take on that?
I think it really depends upon the type of work that you're doing. It's interesting because on my phone, I can open up the Chat GPT app and put it into a mode to where I'm having a conversation with it, and it's giving me suggestions or doing problem solving with me. I'm not prompting, I'm talking, right? But that's a certain type of interaction. That's going to elicit a certain type of response or quality of work or whatever the case may be. Now, when I'm doing really deep work or something that is part of an extended workflow, this is where prompt engineering comes into play. And, I have a feeling that for some people, again, this is kind of an inflection point, a moment in time where you're going to make a decision and say, well, I'm going to go ahead and learn prompt engineering. I think it's important because this is the way that we interact with models, or I'm just going to sit back and wait for the tools that I use to give me guidance. This is kind of like Microsoft Copilot, right? To where you can go in and use AI within the application to get some type of output from Word or Excel or PowerPoint, whatever the case may be. But for individuals who know that in the background it's GPT-4 and they know prompt engineering, they could go into PowerPoint and prompt it a certain way or use Copilot a certain way to save that much more time in the output that's being created, right?
Mm-hmm.
So having prompt engineering skills, I believe, it's like when the internet came out and creating web pages. to where you had a choice. Do you want to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to create a web page, or do you want to go ahead and use a tool that's going to build the web page for you? And then you know what happens with that. You build the web page and you want to do something custom, and then you don't know how to program it. Right? So,
Yes.
it's that it's that point, like, do you want to know how to see? The thing is, though, is prompt engineering is easy. It's easy to get started. There is no programming code. You're just using natural language. And so, this is it's a skill that is accessible by a lot of people. You don't have to like have a programming mind. It's helpful if you sometimes think like a programmer when building these prompts. But to engineer a great prompt is really about understanding the elements that go into that prompt and what you're trying to create. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything programmatic. So yes, I'm in the camp of you should know prompt engineering and should take the time to walk through what makes a great prompt.
And I think from my perspective, even though I'm not the expert in this conversation, but I think coming from kind of my perspective, I feel like prompt engineering is a specific way of communicating with a database. And it's very outcome driven. Usually, if you're just conversation, usually like brainstorming is like low stake. But if we're talking about like prompt engineering, it's usually we need a specific outcome. And ideally persistently that prompt can continuously, persistently, high quality wise produce the outcomes that we want it to produce. So it's kind of like a science, like a emergent science behind that. And as
Right.
technology evolve, even though maybe it will become human like, and you don't have to be so specific, but it taps into the good way of communication. So a lot of times when we communicate, if we're not specific enough, even human, there's confusion and there's not a good outcome coming from that communication. So it's ultimately a good way to practice exact communication between human and a database.
Oh yeah, I believe so. And some of these models, especially on the text-based models, they're just weird. Like it's wild to see how it acts. And even today, there are still research papers coming out about how you can coax the model for better performance by doing something that you wouldn't even think about, like giving the model a $200 tip. So if you go in and you go into Chat GPT and say, hey, if you perform this task and do it well, I'm going to give you a $200 tip, it gives a better response. And that's, through research that was found out. And so we don't know everything about these models yet and what's entirely possible. How do you find out? Through prompt engineering. You have these scientists going in and trying to do all these various prompts, a lot of it based on human psychology, to elicit and get back different types of results. And so, even though some people are like, well, just wait, there'll be tools that'll come out and, tell you exactly how to prompt. Like that may be the case, but if you know prompt engineering, you'll be able to go ahead and use these tips and tricks along the way to get better results. You can't tell me that a research paper is going to come out, they're going to make some major breakthrough, and you can start using it immediately with a model. Like, how long is it going to take a vendor to start implementing that in their tool? Like, they're going to have to test it. They're going to, they're going to have to do all kinds of different things to it before they make it available. And in this day and age, when speed is a factor as far as like productivity or all kinds of other things, that's a position I want to be in. I don't want to be. I want to have agency. Like I want to feel confident that I can go in and work with whatever model I need to get the results out from that model.
And that also helps us to have a sense of calmness among, like, everything's moving fast, but I know I have the agency, therefore I'm able to be calm about it and
Right.
and do it as on a pace. Great. Um, Imagine that there's no budget limit. Imagine in the ideal world. and maybe later this year or next year
Yeah,
or whenever, how would you foresee like AI can work harmoniously, productively, supportively with human beings in the learning development space?
everything comes down to performance and measurement. And I believe that if there was, infinite time and money to build these systems, the way that AI would show up is that it could effectively assess performance and then automatically create the best intervention or the best type of experience for an individual based upon their own preferences and how they like to learn, consume media, whatever the case may be. Maybe an automatic coach gets created, and then now you have a one-on-one coach that's going to go ahead and work with you on doing difficult conversations, whatever the case may be.
Mm.
And then once that human goes and performs after that training, then the analytics based upon the KPIs can be measured to see if we have any kind of gain based upon how the AI interacted with that person. And it goes around. And then okay, we weren't hitting the mark. Well, the AI then goes in and reassesses itself and figures out, well, maybe I should have given that person a different type of coach or a different scenario or whatever. And then it goes around and around. So yeah, I think we get to a point to where, again, AI is going to hyper accelerate interventions to increase performance no matter what business it is.
And to wrap this kind of conversation up before we move to the magic piece, what would be your advice or guidance for learning development leaders out there, across all industries? What would be your kind of final guidance on AI and performance?
Yeah, don't ignore it. Work with your leaders, your leadership in understanding the relationship of AI to the business. Put in your governance and security, and then get to work. Because you need to have all those items in place to make sure that your associates, your team members, can use AI effectively. You also need to make sure that you have your eye on the horizon and any kind of commitments that you have with your current vendors across the whole entire HR and learning stack. What does that look like? I mean, what are these vendors doing as far as AI? If you signed a long-term commitment with some type of human resource tool, how are your associates going to interact with it? Because L&D has got a very unique position. Not only do they have to learn how to use AI, but odds are they're going to have to go ahead and spin the whole company up on AI itself, right? And so they're kind of in a unique position today. So yeah, that's the direction I'd give leaders is first making sure to understand the relationship of AI in the business, and then working with corporate leadership on the way that it shows up.
Nice. Great conclusion, Josh. And now my favorite part
Yes,
is the magic piece.
excellent.
I think people may not see you have the a robot at the background.
Uh-huh.
Can you grab it and show everyone? Because I think that's kind of a interesting topic that
Oh,
we talked
sure.
about in our previous
Yeah.
conversation.
Oh, let me grab him. Hold on. It's a robot, right? And
Yeah, look
what's
at
funny
that.
is that
Yeah.
this is a robot that is an instructor. So yeah,
Also looks like a musician too.
it could be like playing a violin, but that's actually an instructor with a pointer.
Nice.
So uh, what's funny about that robot is it's so weird. It's almost like serendipitous that I bought that robot when I started my training business back in 1999, so almost 24 years ago. And it was, again, the idea behind it was the relationship between myself as an instructor and technology. And look at where we're at. We're still at that point where it's human and technology. It's not separate, it's together. And so this has come full circle for me. And now I got this robot sitting behind me that that's what it was there for. It was that relationship. And now it's extremely tight, that relationship, and it's going to get tighter, and how we interact and we partner with artificial intelligence.
That's a beautiful story. And I'm glad that sometimes when serendipity happens, it just like activates, like, oh yeah, it reminds me that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and activates the inner passion and the spirit within us, and make us feel everything's worthy
Right.
after all the journeys. On your path toward, be you and as you are right at this moment, was there any particular challenges that you have to go through that makes who you are today?
Sure. I think back on my career, and a lot of it has to do with my response to new technology or new ways of communicating, and being proactive about it and not sitting back on my heels. That's what led me to this point right here in talking about artificial intelligence, is that when I saw it, I got after it immediately. And I think that, but with that though, I'm very pragmatic when it comes to new technology. I don't, yeah, it may look shiny, and I may beat the drum about a new technology, but you must be extremely realistic about it. That doesn't mean avoidance. And I think that's that balance that I've had throughout my whole entire career of looking at a technology, getting after it, understanding it, and then determining, do I need to move forward with this, or can I head off into a different direction? And so I've tried to relay that to my students and to my customers and clients, and really anyone that I interact with professionally, is making sure that you find that balance no matter where you're at in your career, that you are, um, you understand those moments of magic, right? And that you find joy in them, be realistic about it, lean into it. And I think you're in a better position, as opposed to being tech adverse, or trying to do a wait and see. So my hope is that, individuals be a little bit more proactive, find that balance, find your relationship between yourself and your profession and technology, and try to get to a point where it's harmonious.
Beautifully said. So what do you think is your magic then?
Oh, so I say the rising tide lifts all boats, and what I mean by that, and actually that's a John F. Kennedy saying, but what he's saying there is that, if you put out into the world positive information, and for me, it's knowledge sharing, sharing information about, and at this point in time in my career, AI, you're just helping everybody out. And I've been really blessed, because I've been able to impact the careers and the professions of many individuals, at different scale, and in so much that, still to this day, I get an email or a text message of people just saying thanks. And so I think that, my magic, or my, skill, is just helping people out.
I feel like I'm getting a master class on how to look at technology from a very strategic, evergreen perspective. And thank you very much, Josh,
Oh, my
for
pleasure. Yeah, this has been great. I really
sharing.
enjoyed the conversation.